Hi, everyone, and welcome to this broadcast. Mark DeJesus here. I am your brother from another mother. I'd love to help people experience healing and freedom in their life, especially when it comes to mental, emotional, and relationship health. I am thrilled to share with you one of my latest resources, my newest book, The OCD Healing Journey, getting to the heart of our obsessive and compulsive struggles. And so what I'd like to do today is I'd like to dive into the subject of what is OCD and give you in a part one an understanding of how obsessions work. And if this resource is a blessing and a help, you want to dive in and jump into the OCD Healing Journey, which is available now for purchase online. We'll provide a link in this video, and you can find it anywhere on my website by going to markdejesus.com. Well, we need to understand obsessions because many people approach their thought life with an influence of obsessiveness, of an obsessive kind of pattern. And I think it's helpful for those who need work in their own life, and it's also helpful for those to see obsessive patterns in others. Now, typically, culturally, we look at obsession as, I'm obsessed with this TV show, I'm obsessed with this song, I'm obsessed with this pizza, I'm obsessed with this food, or whatever, in a way of like, there's something that is favorable, there's something that I enjoy, that's pleasurable, that I'm moving towards. When it comes to OCD, what we're really talking about with obsessive is disturbing, just a disturbance. We're talking about intrusive, unwanted kind of thought patterns that stir up emotions within the person. And I think it's important to understand this. I think it's important for pastors to understand this, to see it in the lives of those in their church, because you can often chase subjects with people, not realizing, wait a second, how this person is viewing this subject is obsessive compulsive. And you can usually discover it when you're exhausted and you're spinning and you keep trying and you keep convincing and you're going in circles. And we can often exhaust ourselves chasing the subject with them. And many therapists or counselors who don't understand OCD can jump into the pathways of someone's specific obsessive compulsive thought subject and travel with them, trying to rationalize their way out of it and trying to explain things. Not realizing they've already been doing that themselves, and they've already been asking a bunch of people their input on it. The issue is OCD, which is more how they're approaching their thoughts that needs to be addressed. So in this part one, I'm going to talk about what is OCD and what is obsessions. In part two, I'm going to get into what are compulsions so that you understand how this cycle goes into a loop. When we're talking about obsessions, we're talking about thoughts that are intrusive. They invade in. Many times people can talk about them just seeming to come in out of nowhere. They're unwanted. They create a sense of disturbance. They're disturbing, and they can often repeat and return. These thoughts often go against our most important values. Many times intrusive thoughts hit the high stakes scenario. We have certain things that we value of morals or things that we feel are right or doing things in a right way, which are good values. But these values have been surrounded by pressure. The person who's obsessive compulsive has internal self-pressure going on around those subjects. So any thought that comes in that goes against those values creates a upheaval within them. It creates a great deal of disturbance, and they often hit the high stakes scenarios that I'll get into in just a moment, like sexuality, morality, or our walk of faith, or certain areas of cleanliness or integrity and things like that. But it's pressurized. And so the word that I often use is the word disturbance to describe OCD. It's thoughts and emotions that create a disturbance within. You try to chase them, you try to argue with them, you try to do a lot of things to solve them. You might get a little bit of relief, but then they come back again. You stay in these loops, okay? And the disturbance, it kicks up emotions like anxiety. Anxiety is the big one, because that creates a fight or flight response to it. It creates I need to pay attention. High alert happens. But the alarm system of high alert is hijacked. It's distorted. So it's sending signals Your emotions are sending signals of danger over something that doesn't need to be responded to with a danger response. We feel a lot of guilt for having the thought, oh, this is wrong, this is terrible, it goes against my values. There's a sense of conflict. And we can have within that a sense of shame for even having the thoughts. And then when we share them with somebody, we go, obsessors will often go, well, I know this sounds crazy, or I know this sounds stupid, or I know this sounds irrational, but here's kind of what I'm focused on that I feel like needs to be dealt with. There's a nagging sense of incompletion, a sense of I've got to do something about this or I can't move forward. I can't be at rest. I can't move on. And leaving this subject alone means I'm avoiding something that I need to address. Now, as I wrote in my book, just about everyone experiences disturbing, intrusive thoughts. I even read a study, I think it was in the 90-something percentage of people surveyed said, yes, I have those kind of disturbing or intrusive thoughts that happen. Most of the time, they float on by and do not hang around for too long. But for the one who struggles with obsessions and compulsions, these intrusive thoughts are examined, investigated, interrogated. They are highlighted. They're tracked down, meaning like, I gotta figure this thing out. I gotta do something about this. Obsessives believe the thoughts mean something significant. Their alarm system is faulty. It's not working correctly. But it's telling them within them, this thought says something about me. This thought says something about my character. This thought says something that I need to resolve. This thought says something that could happen, I'm capable of doing or participating with. And the reason obsessions become troubling is like I says here on the slide, because of the negatively charged emotional reactions that get stirred up in a person. So it's really the emotions. Now, a lot of times Christians have a hard time dealing with emotions, and there's many different approaches of ignore your emotions, don't pay attention to your emotions, and many can get where they're drowning in emotions, right? But the reality is every thought that we have has a corresponding emotion connected to it. For an OCDer, their certain subjects get highly emotionally charged. They create a big emotional response. The anxiety, the guilt, the shame, the conflict, the sense of disturbance, the sense of something must be done. I must do something about this. There's a lot of confusion on where to land, a lot of confusion on what to do with the thoughts. So they often compulsively travel into a lot of areas in their mind or in their actual actions to try to resolve these things. Now, to the untrained or even ignorant observer, it can be easy to be dismissive. Just stop thinking that way. Just stop thinking that way. And they've tried that. And while there are ways of practicing what sometimes is called thought stopping, which can help in some certain scenarios, there's a renewed way in how they relate to their thoughts that needs to be learned. And the truth is that obsessors can get very exhausted. And obsessions exhaust the one struggling with it. And just being real here, obsessions exhaust the people around them because they're consumed with these thoughts. They become center stage, becomes the center of focus. It's what they talk about. It's what they're focused in on. It's what they're spinning about. They are disconnected from being present because they're lost in whatever it is that the obsession is highlighting. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you kind of a broad stroke of where obsessions can take us. But I want you to know any subject in life can be subject of OCD. You have to understand that. Many times people write to me, is this OCD? Is that OCD? Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not your counselor. I'm your brother from another mother. And so what I am bringing to you here is just examples so you can understand many subject areas that obsessions can go into. And one of the areas is contamination. And this can involve a lot. It can involve fear of germs. It can involve disease. Many people today, the fear of getting COVID, the fear of getting cancer, the fear of contamination, the fear of getting a disease, the fear of being contagious and giving someone else a disease, fear that others will be contaminated, fears that others are going to get a disease. There's an intense, irrational sense of disturbance over cleanliness, right? And so that could be about your room. It could be about your body, a distorted perspective of cleanliness over your body, over your environment, where you, in your car, in your house, wherever you are, of having a distorted perspective about contamination. Many times in OCD, we are very defensive too about these, even though it's irrational, even though it's obsessive. We can be defensive. I don't want to die and get a disease. I gotta make sure that there's a yeah, but that often follows, and we become very guarded, very defensive, and other people many times can't be a help because of the kickback. We're often defensive of the obsessions that we have. It can go into areas of organization. A perceived disorder where even the slightest disorder to the obsessor feels like chaos. There is this quick step to chaos. I need it like this, and then anything else feels like chaos. Well, when is it unhealthy? Well, when it's getting in the way of normal living, day-to-day living, so to speak, where it's getting in the way, it's creating disturbances where you have trouble functioning, right? Being organized, being clean is not a mental health issue. But when it becomes disturbing, becomes compulsive, where OCD is taking over, and it gets in the way of fruitful relationships, because that's really what OCD often interferes with, is you being at peace to interact in where you are in a fruitful and effective way. So I remember years ago when I was pastoring, I had a nice office at the church I was serving at, and I had a nice bookshelf and had all my favorite books up there, and I'd have them, aligned in a certain way where the books are to the front, right? And one of the gentlemen who worked there, he walked in and goes, "Oh, that bookshelf looks really nice." Well, he took one of the books and he pushed the book in, and then he looked at me because he was picking up that maybe I was obsessive compulsive about that. And I looked at it and laughed. I'm like, that doesn't mess with me. If I put the bookshelf up, I'll put the books to the front, but it doesn't get in the way of life. But if I'm in my office and books are all over the floor and all of it, and it's getting in the way of me working, then I need to clean, because I tend to be a clean and organized person. So I didn't manifest OCD in that way, but I did it in a whole bunch of other ways, right? So it's really about when distortions are getting in the way, where there is a disturbance within you. There can become anxiety. There can become even anger when people don't follow your rules, and we have control issues and all kinds of things like that, right? It can go in a lot of different directions. It can go into symmetry. Sometimes this is called just right obsessions, even though I talk about the term just right but never enough in the realm of perfectionism, which invades everyone with OCD, that just right but never enough. But with symmetry, this can go into so many different arenas, but it's a focus on making sure what you see in maybe an appearance of something, an appearance of your body, maybe someone else's appearance in your environment, that things around you feel just right. You need things to feel a certain way. So like I said, it can be your room, it can be your appearance, it could be a checking thing. You become compulsively checking on the stove, the locks, those kind of things. It could be checking for personal flaws and how you look. I feel like it can jump easily into things like body dysmorphia, where you have a disturbing distortion about how you see your physical appearance, which I feel is happening in large numbers today because of the cultural standard of what you should look like or how you should weigh or how your body should look. We become obsessive compulsive now, constantly disturbed in how you feel in your clothes and how you feel in your appearance and things like that. And so this can go into many different areas. It can also involve how you relate to other people, that they need to be just right. They need to have things just right. And now the struggle within you is spreading into how you're interacting with others. There's a very common one is harm obsession. It involves injurious, some type of murderous thought depicting harmful act towards yourself or towards another person. Maybe somebody you're talking to, maybe somebody you're interacting with, a loved one. And so vivid images come to your mind. You become afraid of yourself. You can begin checking your motives. This is where compulsion comes in. Now you're checking your motives, investigating, why did I have this thought? Is it because I feel a certain way? Years and years ago, I started when I started running into this and working through this in my own life and helping others. I remember scenarios where there people who were at a kitchen counter and they see a knife and they're at a gathering and they have a thought of doing something with that knife. And they immediately run out of the room because the thought scared them so much. So they became afraid of themselves, and fear created a high alert on that subject. So now anytime they're around knives, there's a fear, and now you're avoiding the subject. OCD creates a lot of avoidance, a lot of displacement, a lot of, I don't want to be near that because it's going to trigger me. And we can then create a life around trying not to deal with these subjects. And what it does is just magnifies the fear. Now we're just afraid of the issue. And fear gives thoughts power. Fear gives OCD thoughts a tremendous amount of power. Another area gets into sexual immorality, kind of obsessions. You become disturbed by unwanted thoughts that go against your values, your moral values, but they're sexual in nature. And I've run into this a lot as far back as I can remember in doing any kind of coaching, any counsel work, any kind of one-on-one work with people. A lot of it happens sexually inappropriate thoughts about someone you're interacting with. Someone is a waiter or waitress at a restaurant, and they are a patron at the restaurant, and they have a thought, an inappropriate sexual thought. Someone working at the bank, and someone's walking up to the bank teller, and the bank teller has a intrusive thought about the person, and they just want to get out of the room. Someone's having a business meeting with someone and who's attractive, and they have a sexual thought, and now it ran through their being so quickly and created a bunch of startling responses. And then you start compulsively checking, is this something that I really want? Is this something I'm going to do? Maybe I really want this. This thought comes from somewhere. And now we're spinning. Thoughts of I'm going to kiss someone. It can go even into I'm going to harm someone, harm a loved one sexually, or something inappropriate. Parents with OCD can have a thought about their spouse or their child, and they start panicking, right? Remember, OCD thoughts go for the high stake scenarios and create worst case scenario in the high stake areas, right? It can be a same-sex attraction. It could be someone who's married. Maybe this means I want to be with another person. Maybe I'm capable of committing adultery because this thought that came through. They can get into maybe I'm a sexual deviant or I'm a pedophile. And I've worked with people where they have become so afraid they can't even say the word pedophile. So now it's made this word so fear-inducing that they're doing everything they can to avoid it because they feel like it might mean something about them. I ran into this a lot in coaching work where people were trying to have a fruitful relationship with God in their prayer, devotion, Bible reading, worship, and in a moment of worship, they have a sexually inappropriate thought about someone, about the pastor, about the person near them in church. When they're by themselves, inappropriate thought about Jesus, about angels, about the disciples, or even Mary. These are actual examples that have been given to me. And it creates a lot of disturbance and a lot of sense of avoidance. And sexually inappropriate, intrusive thoughts create a lot of disturbance where we don't feel comfortable interacting with people. It gets in the way of our just everyday healthy relationship interaction because we feel so unease in ourselves. A big one that I deal with quite often is relationship OCD, and it was one that has been a struggle in my life for many, many years, and one that I had to confront. I didn't know. It's relationship OCD, or it can be called relationship substantiation. It involves obsessions about the legitimacy or like feeling safe or I can land in a close, intimate, committed relationship. So it often affects the dating stage, moving into engagement and marriage. I've also seen it where people who are married still have those kind of, am I really in love with my spouse? Am I really feeling it? There's a lot of checking and needing of reassurance that you're okay in the relationship. And they're checking, how do I feel about this person right now? Is this the right person for me? Am I really in love? Am I attracted to this person right now? Maybe I love someone else and I haven't met them yet. Oh, maybe that person I just saw crossing the hallway, maybe that's the person I'm really in love with and I just don't know. And it can get into nitpicking the other person or nitpicking their spirituality. Maybe their faith is not as strong. Maybe they're not as far in their walk as I am. Maybe they're just not as attractive for me, or maybe go into all kinds of things. Creates a lot of disturbance. I didn't even know this existed. I just thought I had a very weird, strange, bizarre form of anxiety, and I was just very odd. And it created a lot of shame. It was hard to talk about. And as I began to understand, not only is this an OCD thing, but many other people actually struggle with this. So this leads me now into one that covers a lot of areas. It has to do with religious OCD or scrupulosity. And this is disturbances regarding matters of faith. These are thoughts, scenarios, and emotional tornadoes going on about certain subjects of our faith walk. It can get into hell, eternity, salvation. Am I saved? Am I truly saved? Is my salvation legitimate? So like someone who has relationship OCD, is my love for this person legitimate? Someone with religious OCD, is my faith in God legitimate? Is my salvation good enough? We can spin about blasphemous thoughts of all kinds that maybe come into our thinking. A disturbing thought about God. We do, like I wrote on the slide here, obsessive deep dives. These like deep dives into God or the universe or things that we're spinning about. Certain subjects that get us on rabbit trails. A disturbance over rules, over certain subjects, the unpardonable sin. A religious perfectionism that is constantly at play. There's these patterns of, do I believe enough? Do I have enough faith? Do I trust enough? Am I fully surrendered, fully committed, fully trusting? I make a lot of jokes in my broadcasts about this fully. Everything's got to be fully. Am I fully? I don't know if I'm fully. I need a fully checker. You got to, like a trust meter. Do I trust enough? I don't know if I trust enough. It can get into impure thoughts that you have, certain repentance areas that you feel, certain sin issues that you're spinning about. Religious OCD and scrupulosity have a lot of what's called thought-action fusion, which means a thought showing up in your thinking means you're capable of doing it. It could mean you actually did it. It means that it's the same as doing it, and it says something about you. So OCDers have a very hard time separating a thought that's just floating through, or an imagination, or a just emotional swing, or just having a bad day, and temptation, and true deep meditation, and ownership of a thought. They don't know how to discern. They kind of just fuse it all together. So it doesn't matter if it's a thought they think about 24/7, the thought that they really want, or a thought that's just floating on through. They react the same to it. So it creates an unhealthy response to their thought life. So these are just some examples that I can lay out, but it's important to know as well that obsessions can go anywhere. You can have obsessive disturbances about how a relationship conflict is going, how you had an interaction with someone, about what's happening in the world around you, what's happening in the news. There's a sense of disturbance that can happen in a lot of different areas. Obsessions can and will want to get into anything and everything. Now, I have a lot to say on OCD, and of course, you can get your copy of the OCD Healing Journey. But there's a couple things that I do want to share, is that OCD is fueled by distortions. And I talk about the 7 distortions of OCD because where the subject is, when we go, okay, I realize the problem is not the problem. It's really about how I relate to my thoughts. And 7 distortions, they fog up the windows. Have you ever driven where there's ice over your windshield or fog in the windshield? You kind of see, but it's really challenging. So when they talk about the subject or look at it, it's distorted. And when they talk to other people, they will, share their thoughts and their convictions. And the other person kind of has this response, yeah, but it's the way you're going about it's out of context. It's what they're saying is you're going about your thoughts distorted. Now, many obsessors will go, no, it's not. It can be defensive back. But number one, we have to realize it's fueled by distortions. 2, fear is a major issue. It's the anxiety over the thought. That's why many OCDers are encouraged at some point to walk through exposure therapy, to begin to deal with the subject in a way where they are no longer afraid of it, so that they can walk in their life effectively. And really the main issue is about how you relate to your thoughts. It's not the thought that's arriving. It's how you relate to it. You might think, yeah, but I need to fix and make sure I know this subject. And you've already done that. And you can see you're just in cycles. You're just spinning. We want to stop the spinning. You got to take a step back and realize how you deal with your thoughts has distortions. And what we need renewal in is how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to God, how we relate to other people. And OCDers have a deep, deep struggle with unconditional love, experiencing love from God, experiencing a loving relationship with themselves, and learning how to let that loving relationship flow in how they relate to other people. They struggle with love and grace. Their values are under intense scrutiny, under intense pressure. They're very, very hard on themselves. And the obsession has convinced them they need to do something about it. And that leads us to compulsive behavior, which I will get to in part 2. But I pray this was a blessing and a help to your life and your journey. If it is, get your copy today of the OCD Healing Journey. Let it be a blessing to your life and to those that you care about. If this video was a blessing, would you please like and subscribe? Go to markdejesus.com where you can get some amazing topics for your healing and freedom journey. You can also sign up for our email newsletter and get a free download of my book, Experiencing God's Love as Your Father. You can get that in your hands today. You can also support the ministry work by giving a one-time donation or becoming a monthly supporter. Go to markdejesus.com, click on the donate button, and I look forward to seeing you in future materials. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. This is your brother from another mother saying, I'll be back with part 2.